Our next panelist is Sunsara Taylor. She's a writer for Revolution newspaper and a host on Equal Time for Free Thought on WBAI. Her coverage of the rise of the Christian right has taken her to abortion clinics across the country, sparking verbal battles with Bill O'Reilly, Sean Hannity, and interviews with radio show hosts. Sunsara is currently on a national campus speaking tour for Away with All Gods, Unchanging the Mind, and Radically Changing the World, the recent book by Bob Avakian. In October, she was invited by the UCLA Center for the Study of Religion to participate in an exchange with Center Director S. Scott Barchi on Away with All Gods, Fantasy of Reality. So, Sunsara Taylor.
I'm really glad to be here with everybody. And as he said, I have been going around the country speaking about this fantastic book that's out, Away with All Gods, Unchaining the Mind and Radically Changing the World, which is by Bob Avakian. And there's a lot of books on atheism that are out these days, and one of the things that's unique about this book, there's no book that says thoroughly, rigorously dispels and takes on all forms of religion and metaphysical superstition, while at the same time having so much confidence in people who are caught up in religion that they can break out of it and come to understand the real world. And Avakian is the leader of the Revolutionary Communist Party, so he approaches this not in a dispassionate way, but with the urgent necessity of religion being a shackle and a weight on humanity, and the relationship between unchaining the mind and breaking people out of that and radically changing the world in liberating ways. And he has a profound understanding for what it is about this world, the horrors, the suffering, the nightmares that cause people to feel the need to seek solace in religion. And he speaks to people about how we actually can understand and change the real world, and why the people themselves need to be agents of that, emancipators of humanity, and they need science and consciousness to do that, not metaphysics. And so everywhere I'm going, it's actually very striking. I've spoken to all kinds of different audiences, and everywhere I go, I get even more profound understanding of how urgent this discussion is and the topics covered in this book are. 2 days ago, I was sitting in the Black Studies Department of Cleveland State University, and I was waiting for an interview. I just finished this event, and in the office, there's a group of students and staff who are goofing off and joking, and one of them says something about weed, and then the other one says to them, "I thought you were a Christian." And so the young guy who's going on about weed and trying to uphold smoking marijuana, he says, "But you know the Lord is good. Don't you know the Lord is good? He doesn't have a problem with marijuana. The Lord is good." So they have this debate. And so he starts asking everybody in the office, "You know the Lord is good, and everybody's going, "Yes, the Lord is good, Jesus this, Jesus that." And I'm at the other end of the office, and they don't know me, but he's so sure that everybody thinks the Lord is good, he asked me too. He goes, "You know the Lord is good." And I was like, "No." And I was like, "No, God doesn't exist." And they were really, uh-oh. And then I said, and if you're talking about the Lord as in the Lord of the Christian Bible, I'm sorry, that is not a good Lord. That is a monstrous, maniacal, vicious, vindictive, truly, truly vicious God. And as you can imagine, the temperature dropped in the room and there was a lot of tension. So I thought, okay, I better say more than that. So I said, I grew up Christian, but if you read the Bible, you really have to confront it as a bloodthirsty book. And they're all looking at me, and the one woman starts going, "Jesus, Jesus, Jesus." And I said, no, in Deuteronomy, they command the stoning to death of women if they're not virgins when they get married. In Psalms, they command you to bash in the heads of the babies of your enemies. You go through that Bible, Leviticus, kill homosexuals. You go through it. It is bloodthirsty. God sends plagues down to kill the people worshiping the wrong God. Kill the people worshiping the right God, worshiping in the wrong way. Sometimes he sends down plagues just to show off his mighty strength. I was like, what kind of God is that? So they all go looking for their Bible. This was funny, too. Because they're like, that's not in the Bible. That's not in our Bible. So, and so I had my Bible with me, and I offered to give it to them so they could look up the quotes. And this was the funny part. They go, "No, I think you have the atheist Bible." So they went to get their own Bible, and they looked it up, and I asked them to look up Numbers 31. And this is one of the things that Avakian does in this book, is he asks people to actually think about and confront what's in the Bible. And so I asked them to read Numbers 31, verses 17 and 18. And this is a story of God commanding Moses, and Moses commands his people to go out and massacre the Midianites because they're tempting the chosen people into worshiping the wrong God. So his people go out and they slaughter the Midianites. And they come back and say, "We killed all these men and we took the cattle." And Moses is really angry. And why is Moses angry? Not because they killed people and took the cattle, but because they didn't kill enough. And Moses says, you go back there, you kill all the men, you kill all the babies, you kill all the women who have known a man by sleeping with him, and the women who are virgins, you take them for yourselves as sex slaves. So I'm telling this to this staff, and then they finally find their Bible and they look it up, and it's right there. If anybody here is like them and needs to hear the quote, it says, now therefore, kill every male among the little ones, and kill every woman who has known a man by sleeping with him. But all the young girls who have not known a man by sleeping with him, keep alive for yourselves. And so after reading this, the one woman, and other people too, they start saying, oh, you're taking it out of context. And I have to say, not only is this consistent with the essential message of the Christian Bible, both the Old Testament and the New Testament, and yes, the person of Jesus Christ himself. We don't have time to discuss this here, but we can get into it in the Q&A. But I cannot imagine a context in which that would be justifiable. This is raping women en masse, butchering babies, exterminating people. This is genocide. And this woman, as she began to justify genocide, because this is what religion does, it really is a shackle, and it mobilizes people to not understand the world and to embrace their own suffering and to actually be mobilized for horrors. As she begins to justify genocide to me, I told her very bluntly, I said, this is a slave mentality that you are voicing. And it is long since time that oppressed people, all people, but especially oppressed people, break out of this and be a part of emancipating humanity, changing the real world, coming to understand the real world. The Bible does not reflect the will of God. It reflects the ideas of very human authorities. And the same is true of the Quran and of all the other religious scriptures. And the history of the spread of religion has been the history of one people conquering another, of the suppression of science, of torture, of rape, of the forceful subjugation of women, that is half of humanity. I told this woman, and I told the staff that, I already said this, that you have to break out of this, that this is not good. And I want to return to this in a minute, but I think it's important to step back, and we're talking about morality. We'll all have different things to say about it. I also think you can't use God to be good because gods don't exist. And that's something, by definition, if we're going to have morality or be good, we're going to do it without gods, and we can get into that more too. But I want to say it's important to understand that all morality and all moral systems, whether religious or secular, reflect particular epochs in human history. Most fundamentally, human societies are shaped by the level of the development of the productive forces. That is, the level of technology, the natural resources, the land, etc. And they're shaped by how people are organized, and we're always organized in different ways to come together and make use of those productive forces to meet the material requirements of life. That is, our need to eat, to have shelter, to reproduce the next generation. And throughout human history, we've organized ourselves in different ways at different points. And this has given rise to different notions of what is right and wrong in different moral systems. For instance, if we look at why is all this brutality and bloodshed in the Bible, if we look at it, who wrote it, it makes perfect sense. The Bible was written by people who lived in a slave-owning, agrarian, patriarchal society. They lived before the development of science. They didn't understand why things were happening. Jesus sees somebody having a seizure, he thinks it's a demon possession. Okay, that's ignorance. And so they dreamed up gods that reflected the worlds in which they lived and reinforced those worlds. That's why you have things like the 10th commandment of the Bible that says, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's ass, oxen, wives, and slaves. It doesn't condemn slavery. It says you shouldn't covet your neighbor's slaves. This is the morality of slave owners. And it's from that epoch in history when there was slave societies. Today, even the biblical literalists and the Christian fascists feel the need to cheat and misquote their own Bible when they post the 10 Commandments in courtrooms. And they do this, we know when they post the 10th commandment, they never mention slaves. They always cut it off, thou shalt not covet. And they do this not because they are profoundly enlightened. Certainly they are not. The likes of Sarah Palin, George Bush, Judge Roy Moore, these kinds of people they're waging an all-out assault on science, on evolution, on the knowledge of global warming. They declare the war in Iraq and Afghanistan as God's will. They are attacking women's right to abortion and birth control, both in this country and all over the world. They are taking away the rights of gay people in very ominous ways with greater implications. These are not enlightened people. So why do they take this out about slavery? It's because we no longer live in a slave-owning society. And so now even these reactionaries can say that's immoral, and we're embarrassed by that. We'll leave that out. And today, we live, instead we live in a capitalist society.